Are BMWs and Mercedes cut from the same cloth? I also wanted to do a video for the longest time where I juxtapose the build quality of Mercedes and BMW products. I know there are a lot of people out there who like both. I know there are a lot of people who are specific marque loyalists, but the overall consensus for the longest time has been that the Mercedes is more of the car that you drive, you know, every day and, you know, put your family in, etc., etc. The BMW is more of the performance car, maybe the bachelor's car. And there were a number of iconic BMW models, the E30, the E28, the E9. These cars have more or less survived because of people's dedication to them, but I think from what I've seen that there are a lot of challenges with these cars because of, you know, some build quality issues. And I think that BMW wasn't deliberately trying to make cars that were bad. They just were trying to lighten the cars, make the cars more sporty, etc., you know, to make them more appealing to a certain demographic that may not necessarily be a lifetime car owner. I always remember looking at older BMWs and seeing that the leather was always peeling, that there were problems with the dash, say that funny canted-in dash, and that, you know, there was always some kind of issue with them. I don't know, the owners would always have to modify certain things in the car, like the suspension or the wheels or the brakes or whatever, because they felt that well, they were there to be modified, I guess. And I think a lot of BMW owners look at their cars as blank canvases, apart from the M cars, which I think still get modified a good bit. The funny thing about BMWs is, while in the Mercedes community it's sort of looked down on to hot rod older cars, and usually that's not the norm. You know, I know there's some people that wish it was the norm, but it's just not. The cars were too well made. With BMWs, it's sort of the opposite. I think a lot of BMW owners actually prefer to modify their cars. That's why you see a lot of E9 coupes with modern, like, S-Series inline sixes that produce 300 to 400 horsepower out of the box. So you do see that quite a bit. And I think because in some aspects, BMWs, at least from the 70s and early 80s, were simpler cars. This was easier to do than it would have been on a Mercedes, which was a much more complex creature. The biggest problem that we see with Mercedes products from these eras often have to do with their onboard technologies failing or stuff wearing out just from sheer amounts of use or lack of use. With BMWs, I think some of the problems we see are more so from build quality issues and more so from people getting the cars and modifying the car without doing any long-term repairs or maintenance, which to me is, you know, not a great recipe if you want to keep a car on the road for forever and ever. But I think that they're two distinct cars at the end of the day. Buying a BMW or a classic BMW, you pretty much go into the car with the expectation that either an enthusiast has owned it and that person has done a lot of stuff, whether it's a modification or whether it's excruciating work to keep it bone stock. It's typically a car you buy from a private individual, or you buy it and you acknowledge that it's a project and you kind of have to build it. I think the funny thing is you don't see a lot of classic BMWs being offered by sellers on, you know, Bring a Trailer or wherever in the open marketplace. You don't see a lot of guys that specialize just in those cars like you do classic Mercedes. And that shows that Mercedes preserved better and lasted longer and were often not used as sports cars, so they weren't run into the ground as much. I think when Mercedes did come up with higher horsepower cars, you know, we're not talking about the 380 SL, we're talking about the 560 SL, the 560 SEC, the 190E 16 valve, they always held back a little bit in the performance department so the car would last longer. Like if you compare an E30 M3 and a 201 034, which is the 16 valve, you could tell that on the 16 valve they held off. They didn't tune the engine to maximum power. They didn't make the suspension so firm that the car was undrivable. And that's why we get so many 16 valves that don't have blown up engines, unless some idiot rebuilt your engine or something and you happen to, you know, have some problems with that later on. We do see that quite a bit with older Mercedes, but with BMWs, there's this sort of idea that you get to 100,000 miles, you're going to need an engine rebuild. You know, not just a valve job, an engine rebuild. And then you look at some of the aluminum castings in the motor, and they're not as good as maybe Mercedes are, you know. But anyway, all things aside, I think if you like classic BMWs, you need to not apply your BMW philosophy to your classic Mercedes. You should keep them separate, because BMWs require a special type of treatment, attitude, driver profile, and maintenance, and so do Mercedes. They are pretty much apples and oranges. I know there were a lot of European car shops in the 80s that would fix anything that rolled in the door that said made in Germany, but Mercedes are sort of a distinct breed. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications, and we will see you in the future.